They told him not to open the gate. It was the only thing the lawyer said twice. "The land is yours now," he'd muttered, pushing a crumpled deed across the desk. "But don't open the gate to the lower mine. Let it rust shut." His voice had a weight to it. Not legal obligation. Fear. The kind of fear you inherit from stories whispered by old men over weak coffee and stronger regrets. Caleb didn't ask questions. He had stopped asking those years ago, when the past proved more dangerous than the future. The inheritance came from an uncle he never met, Silas Hawthorne, an old miner who had disappeared from public record decades ago. No death certificate, no funeral, just silence, and now a sudden legal note. One next of kin to receive property of Silas J. Hawthorne, presumed deceased. Caleb didn't care. A free cabin, a few acres of untouched Appalachian forest, and maybe the quiet he'd been chasing his whole damn life. What could go wrong? The land was wrong. It wasn't the way it looked, it was the way it waited. He felt it before he even saw it. A gravel road snaked off the main highway, curling like a black vein through a stretch of ancient pine. The trees grew too close together here, their trunks charred at the base as if they'd survived a fire no one remembered. Fog hung low over the ground in wide, unmoving sheets, clinging to the dirt like it belonged there. His phone had no signal. The GPS froze a mile before the trail ended, and yet he knew where to go, like something in the woods was guiding him, pulling him toward it. The map Silas left behind was hand-drawn, but precise, and at the center of it, etched in a thick circle of red ink, was the word gate. He parked beside the cabin, an old timber structure half swallowed by ivy. The shutters were rotting off their hinges. A porch swing swayed in a breeze that didn't touch the trees. It didn't creak. It ticked, like a metronome. He didn't enter the cabin first. He followed the map. Past the tree line, the trail narrowed to a broken path of cracked stone slabs. They looked like old grave markers, some barely visible through the moss. The wind stopped here. Even the air changed, like it had been filtered through something that hated lungs. Then he saw it. The gate. It rose from the earth like a piece of black machinery, half buried in the throat of the world. 8 feet tall, welded iron, bolted into a crumbling stone arch crusted with age. Numbers etched into the lintel read 19-07. Not a date, a depth. The metal was warped in places like it had been burned and then frozen. The latch was sealed with a heavy rusted lock. Old, but not broken. Someone wanted this thing shut for a very long time, and perched above it on a jagged branch of dead wood that grew sideways out of stone was a single canary. Its yellow feathers were dull with ash. It didn't move, didn't blink, just stared, head tilted at an unnatural angle like a taxidermy display that had learned to disapprove. He stared back. "What are you doing out here, little guy?" he whispered. The bird didn't sing. Instead, it shuffled one clawed foot along the branch, just enough to draw attention to the tiny red mark beneath it. A glyph, carved into the wood. He took a step back, and then another. He didn't remember turning around, but somehow he was walking again, breath caught in his chest, footsteps crunching too loud on the brittle earth. When he looked back, the canary was still there, watching. That night, the cabin welcomed him like a place that had never stopped being lived in. Dust lay over everything, but nothing was broken. The kitchen still smelled faintly of meat and smoke. Upstairs, the bedroom was immaculately made, tightly tucked blankets, empty dresser, A small wooden box of yellowed teeth in the nightstand drawer. The oil lamp on the table lit instantly. It cast the shadows long. He found Silas's notebooks in the sitting room, 20 or 30 of them, stacked like a shrine beside the fireplace. He picked one at random, the leather binding cracked in his hand. The entries were scattered, paranoid, scribbled lines, warnings repeated over and over. He won't leave. The bird doesn't sleep. It's not singing. That means it's working. Only one can watch at a time. Then a final page, dated only weeks before the legal claim on the land. If you found this, and it's still quiet, leave. Don't look at him. Don't open the gate. Don't let it sing. At 2:41 a.m., Caleb woke without knowing why. He moved to the window. The forest was black, except for a branch near the gate. The canary sat there still, eyes locked on the cabin window. And this time, it opened its beak, but made no sound. It didn't have to. The first step down felt like crossing into another world. The staircase carved into the stone was narrow, uneven, and steep. Caleb had to brace himself against the wall with one hand while clutching the flickering oil lantern with the other. Each step echoed down the shaft in a metallic thud that felt too loud, like the mine wasn't used to hearing noise anymore. The air changed by the third step. Cooler, wetter, dense in a way that clung to skin and clothes, like moisture with a weight. He could taste it, iron, sulfur, and something foul beneath. A flavor like old teeth and dried blood. 10 steps down, the sky was gone. 15 steps, and the light behind him had thinned to a memory. At 20, he paused, not because he was afraid, but because he couldn't remember how long he'd been walking. He turned and looked up. Nothing. Only black above, the kind that seemed to drink the light from his lantern. He kept moving. But the stairs opened into a tunnel that breathed. That was the only way to describe it. The air moved in shallow waves, pushing against his face in slow, rhythmic pulses. The walls weren't just damp, they were sweating. Veins of wet stone glistened like muscle tissue under dim flame. Old wooden supports lined the corridor, most of them rotted and splintered. Some had collapsed entirely, forcing Caleb to duck under or step through shattered beams like walking through the ribs of some long-dead creature. Abandoned mining tools lay scattered across the floor. Cracked picks, snapped shovels, rusted canisters. One helmet had dried hair still caught in the chin strap. The floor was dirt and gravel, but Caleb kept feeling like it moved beneath him. Just slightly, like something breathing underneath the path, trying not to be noticed. He followed the map Silas had left in the cabin. It was crumpled and torn at the edges, stained with what might have been oil or blood. The drawing was crude, hand-sketched in thick black pencil, but it had one thing that stood out among the chaotic lines and scribbled notes. A red circle, deep in the lower tunnel system, and just beneath it, a word written in different handwriting. S-E-A-L. That was where Caleb was headed. The first sign that he was close came as a symbol carved into the wall, a jagged spiral, etched with something sharp, its lines filled with black soot. Then another. Then a handprint, small like a child's, pressed into the rock. Not painted, imprinted, as though whoever left it had sunk into the wall like wet clay. Caleb felt his skin crawl. He pulled his jacket tighter and pressed forward. The corridor narrowed. His lantern dimmed, as if something ahead was pulling its flame away, not extinguishing it, just feeding on it. The shadows stretched longer, bent inward. Even his own felt wrong. moving out of sync with his steps by a half-second lag, like it was remembering instead of reflecting. The map showed a split in the tunnel, a fork. Left led to collapsed supports. Right to a slope labeled Vein in shaky handwriting. Caleb turned right. The ceiling grew lower. Chains hung from rusted hooks overhead. Some had nooses tied into them. Others still swung slightly, though there was no wind. At the bottom of the slope, the tunnel opened into a chamber. Wide, hollow, circular. The ceiling arched high above, with black stalactites clinging like teeth. Old support beams ringed the chamber, some snapped like twigs. In the center of the room was a raised stone platform, and on top of it, the cage. It was unmistakably the same. Iron old, welded shut, its bars twisted into spirals near the top, and its base stained with dark, sticky residue. Blood, dried and smeared in claw patterns across the perch inside. But there was no bird. The cage door was open. Caleb approached slowly. Every step echoed off the chamber walls in unnatural ways. Some footsteps repeated. Others vanished mid-air. As he neared the cage, he could feel it. Heat. The stone platform radiated warmth, faint but real, like it had only recently stopped burning. He crouched. Inside the cage was a single yellow feather, blackened at the edges. It lay there like a warning. That's when he felt the vibration. It started under his feet, a low hum, steady and slow, like the mine had a heartbeat. He stood up fast, raising the lantern, and then came the whispers. They weren't around him. They were inside the stone, inside the walls. Caleb backed away from the cage. Something was rising. Not physically, in the air, in the pressure. A sound just above hearing, like metal dragging against bone. And then, a voice, not whispered, not spoken, carved. You opened it. Caleb spun. Nothing. The seal is watching. The lantern flared. The flame stretched straight sideways, pulled toward the far end of the chamber. That's when he saw it. A shape stood in the shadows, ragged, humanoid, but not human. Its outline pulsed, flickering like an image on a broken TV screen. Its limbs were too long. Its hands dragged the ground. Its helmet was caved in, and beneath it, the face was an open circle of teeth and emptiness. And on its shoulder, the Canary, perched, watching, still alive, still silent. Caleb didn't think. He turned and ran, his lantern swinging wildly. Behind him, the mine groaned. The walls shifted. The shadows cracked. The creature didn't follow. It waited. Because it knew, just like the bird. Once you open the gate, you never really leave. He didn't remember the way back. Caleb's feet moved, but the tunnels shifted. The mine was no longer a place. It was a maze with a memory. Left turns led to places he hadn't seen. Right turns opened into tunnels that looped back to where he'd started. Once he turned and saw the cage again, the same single feather lying inside. But this time there were two cages, one rusted and empty, the other sealed and breathing. He ran harder. His boots slipped on gravel. The lantern's flame stuttered with every jolt. It cast long streaks of distorted light that twisted the shadows around him. For a moment he thought he saw himself in one, his own silhouette peeling off the wall and walking the opposite direction. He didn't stop to look again. He only ran. The air thickened. He could barely breathe. Every exhale fogged in front of his face like the tunnel had grown cold-blooded. Each breath sounded like it belonged to someone else, deeper, slower, hungrier. He clutched the map, now wet with sweat and bleeding ink. The red circle was gone. The entire center of the paper had melted, smearing Silas's marks into a black stain. Then, his lantern sputtered and died. He stood in blackness, total, crushing, swallowing. He couldn't hear his own heartbeat, couldn't feel his hands. The walls pulsed with a sound that wasn't sound, more like memory grinding its teeth. Then a match, his last. He struck it with shaking fingers. A pale flame bloomed, and then the walls opened their eyes, dozens, all around him, embedded in the rock like wet marbles, white, lidless, and unblinking. They stared from the stone, the floor, the ceiling, and in each one he saw a different version of himself. Some screaming, some begging, one hanging from a chain, another digging his own grave into the tunnel wall with bloodied hands. He dropped the match, and the dark closed its eyes again. He stumbled forward, blind. The mine was alive now. It shifted underfoot. Rocks pulsed beneath his boots. Stone groaned with breath. Sometimes he heard laughter, his own voice warped, echoing too long. A light appeared ahead, faint, greenish. He followed it, too tired to think. The light led him to a cavern he hadn't seen before, round and smooth, like it had been melted into shape instead of carved. At the center, a deep pit gaped in the floor, surrounded by old bones. Some still had boots, others had helmets. One had a mirror nailed to its chest. Caleb approached it. The reflection didn't match him. It smiled. Something moved behind him. Not a footstep, not a creature. The feeling of being remembered. He turned. At the far end of the cavern, the thing stood. Closer now, clearer. Its skin wasn't skin. It was layers of old cloth and stone dust, caked over bone, rippling like heat waves. Its arms dragged the floor. Its face, or what was left of it, looked like cracked glass around a hollow center. And on its shoulder, the Canary, its eyes glowing now, its beak slightly open, still silent. The thing raised a hand and pointed. The ground cracked, not beneath Caleb, beneath the pit. From its depth came a noise so deep it didn't sound like sound. It felt like something breaking in the center of him, like every bone in his body tried to remember what it felt like to be crushed. The bones around the pit began to rattle. The mirror shattered. The thing didn't move, but Caleb heard it speak, without a mouth. Now you understand. The walls bled, literal blood. It dripped from the ceiling in slow, heavy drops, each one hissing as it struck the stone. Steam rose. Symbols began to form on the walls, burned into the rock in long, curved lines. The language looked ancient, wet, alive. Then Caleb heard it. Not with ears, with everything. The Canary. It made a sound, just one note. Not a chirp, a chime, like a cracked music box slowed down by time and rot. And in that moment, Caleb felt his body split, like the sound reached inside and peeled something loose. He ran. Through tunnels that no longer had names, through rooms that hadn't existed until that moment. Back through the gate he thought he'd passed hours ago, only to realize it hadn't been his gate. It was a new one, fresh, built just for him. And outside that gate, he collapsed, face down in cold dirt. The stars overhead flickered, but they weren't stars. They were eyes. And one of them blinked. It started like thunder, but not from above, from below. Caleb had barely made it out of the shaft when the ground trembled, subtle at first like a distant train, but growing stronger with each breath. The trees around the cabin bent slightly, not from wind, but as if pulled toward the mine by something beneath the surface. The birds were gone. The insects silent. Even the Canary, still perched on that same crooked branch, seemed to hold its breath. The forest wasn't still. It was listening. He staggered toward the cabin. His legs barely moved right. His thoughts were broken into scattered images. The eye-filled walls, the hollow voice, the silent scream of the bird. He didn't remember running up the stairs. He didn't remember opening the door. But he was inside now, and the cabin had changed. The walls dripped, not water, something thicker. A black, slow ooze like sap or oil. The smell was nauseating. Not rot, but memory. The way an old coat smells when pulled from a flood-damaged box. Mildew, regret, and something else underneath. Something you can't name. The furniture was exactly where he'd left it, but it was watching him now. He turned on the oil lamp. It flickered with a strange hue, green at the edges. It threw long, impossible shadows that moved after he did. The bookshelves seemed taller. The hallway stretched farther than it should. Every corner of the cabin was wrong, like someone had remade it from memory and got the details just slightly off. And on the table, the cage. Back again. Closed this time. The door welded shut. But inside, it wasn't the canary. Not quite. It looked like the bird. Same yellow feathers, same black eyes. But it was larger now. Its head too round, its feathers too thin, its chest pulsing with a breath it shouldn't have. It didn't move, but it was alive. Caleb stared. The air inside the cabin grew thick like syrup. Time slowed, and the bird blinked. Outside, the mine let out a sound like a furnace exhaling. The windows fogged instantly. Something passed in front of them. A shadow as wide as the cabin itself, heavy, crawling. The porch creaked, not from wind, but weight, then silence. Caleb moved to the window, wiped a small circle clear. Nothing, just trees, the mine, the fog. Then, a face, pressed against the glass. It wasn't human. It had the rough shape, eyes, mouth, something like a nose, but it was wrong. Skin the color of stone and coal dust, cracked with red light beneath. Its eyes were pits of rotted gold. No pupils, just rings, spirals. Its mouth was open. But instead of a tongue, it had roots, long and dripping with sap. Caleb stumbled back. The face didn't follow. It just watched. Then it faded, slowly, as though backing into the fog without ever moving its feet. The porch creaked again. He didn't check it this time. He couldn't. He turned back to the cage. The canary was gone. In its place, a mirror. Small, round, framed in scorched brass. He leaned in. At first he saw himself. Then he saw Silas. Then he saw nothing. And then he saw the mine. Not from the outside, from beneath, from its core. Stone folded into tunnels, blood slicked across ancient roots. Teeth, not fossils, actual teeth, jutting from walls that weren't walls. Veins pulsing with black-red ooze. Something vast curled in the lowest chamber, asleep in chains made from pickaxes and breath. And above it all, the bird. Not perched. Hungarian strung up like bait, suspended by old miners' ropes, its beak forced shut with rusted wire. Its eyes glowed white. Even in sleep, it watched. Caleb collapsed. His knees hit the cabin floor. The lamp shattered. Darkness spilled like ink across the room. The sounds outside returned. A scraping, a dragging, a humming. The hum was back. Low, mechanical, rhythmic, like a machine powering on deep below the crust. The floor began to vibrate. Pictures fell from the walls. The bookshelves collapsed. The journal pages flew into the air, fluttering like dying birds. The fireplace groaned, and a breath escaped from it. Yes, a breath. Hot, sulfuric, alive. The house was breathing with the mine now. Then came the voice, not outside, inside him. "The bird is waking," he screamed, his body convulsed. He clawed at his ears, his eyes, anything to make it stop, but the voice didn't come through sound. It came through bones. The cabin split, literally split, walls peeling open like tree bark, revealing the woods outside now filled with red fog. Trees bent backward. The sky above flickered like film reel burning in a projector. He crawled out, fingers bleeding, and the canary was there, perched on his shoulder. It whispered, "Now you carry it." Then it dug its claws into his skin and vanished. Caleb collapsed again, this time face first into soil that pulsed like flesh. The mind behind him groaned once more, deeper now, louder. Something was rising, not walking, climbing, slow, ancient, patient. And it wasn't just from the mine anymore. It was coming through him. And the bird was inside. He woke in the dirt, face down, cold. But the mine was closed again. The gate was sealed. The air was still. The trees were too quiet. Caleb sat up slowly, groaning from pain he didn't remember earning. His hands were scraped raw, his coat torn down the spine. The taste of soot coated his tongue. He was above ground, alive, but not the same. Something had changed, inside. The morning sun filtered through the trees in long, brittle rays. But it wasn't warm. It felt filtered, like it had passed through glass before touching him. His truck was back, where it had been days ago, or was it longer? It looked untouched, undriven. The engine even clicked when he opened the door, like it had been recently used. But he hadn't driven. He hadn't left. He stood in the clearing for a long time. Then he turned and saw the cage. It was on the porch, waiting for him. The same old iron frame, welded shut, slightly cleaner now, like it had been polished, a bow of dried vines tied to the top. And inside, the canary, still, alive, eyes open. It watched him. He stepped forward slowly, heart beating harder the closer he got. Every instinct screamed to stop, but something deeper, quieter, whispered to continue. He crouched down. The bird blinked. Its eyes weren't just black. They were mirrors. He looked into them and saw himself, but not him. In the reflection, he was standing at the mine, smiling, holding a shovel, digging. And behind him, another man, bound at the wrists, face wrapped in cloth, begging. The reflection shifted. Now he was inside the cabin, scribbling in one of Silas's old journals. The bird sat on his shoulder, whispering. He blinked and the reflections were gone. The canary tilted its head, then opened its beak, and it sang. A single note, high, clear, bone-piercing. The trees bent, the wind reversed. The cabin windows cracked outward like something inside had screamed too loud. And Caleb remembered. He remembered Silas, not from photos, from dreams. He remembered his grandfather's hands, rough and bloodied. Remembered waking in the woods as a child, alone, and hearing wings above. He remembered the voice beneath the mine, not as something new, but something ancient. A family name, a burden passed down. He remembered opening the gate, not once, but twice. Not just this time, a lifetime ago. The seal had never been closed, it had been watched. That's what the canary was for, not a warning, a lock. Not one that kept things out, one that kept something in, but the cage had been empty for too long. The moment he entered the mine, the seal had cracked. The moment he looked at the bird, it began to stir. And now, it sang. He stepped back. The porch snapped under his foot. The ground pulsed. He turned and looked toward the trees. All of them leaned now toward him. The wind began to hum, a low, guttural tone, like an engine turning in the belly of the world. And beneath his feet, the dirt shifted. Not subtly, like something breathing, like lungs below the roots. The birds sang again, and the sky darkened. He ran, to the truck, to the road, to anywhere but here. But the forest had changed. Every tree now wore a face, not carved, not painted, grown. Eyes like rotten knots, mouths stretched wide and silent. Their branches reached for him like arms. The gravel path was gone. His tires sank into black soil. His hands trembled. The truck wouldn't start. The bird kept singing, not behind him anymore, but in the seat next to him. He screamed. The sound didn't leave the cab. It stayed inside, ricocheting, folding, growing louder than him. Then, silence. He turned to the bird, and it spoke. "You are the new seal." Its eyes flared white. The truck engine started, but the road went down. Not forward, not out, back into the mine. Caleb slammed the brakes. The truck didn't stop. The dirt pulled it. The world bent. Sky curling like burning paper. Stars snapping out like dying bulbs. His hands let go of the wheel. The forest opened, and the gate stood before him again. Wider than before, a mouth with no throat. Inside, something awaited. Not asleep, not dead. Ready. As the truck passed the gate, Caleb saw hundreds of birds perched on the rocks above. All dead. Except one. The Canary flew ahead of him, leading, smiling. This land is for sale. Quiet, remote, untouched Appalachian forest. Comes with a rustic old cabin, private road, and access to a sealed historic mining site. Perfect for hunters, hikers, or writers seeking solitude. Comes with one condition. Don't open the cage, even if it sings.